Hi everyone, welcome to Springcreek Online. My name is Laura, I'm here with my good friend Yadi, and we are so excited to welcome you this morning and say hi, especially to those of you that may have joined us the past few weeks. If you're new, we would love a chance to meet you. Help us do that by texting NEW to 96995. And everyone, don't forget to join us every Sunday in our digital lobby via Zoom at 9:45. You can find the link to the comments of the service post.
We're also opening up our building and worshiping in person starting on October 18th. Woo-woo! We have health and safety precautions in place like social distancing and requiring masks at all times. But there will not be any children ministry on Sundays, but parents don't worry because Saturday, October 24th, we will start family services to have a family experience. And also don't forget about our family drive-thru on October 31st. And if you need any details or any information, please check out our website or any of the Parent Connect social media. Can't wait to see you and see your family.
And lastly, we want you to know that the community of believers is being taken care of by the generosity of our Spring Creek family. People are being pastored, communities are being built, and families are being transformed because of those that have chosen to give to the mission of Spring Creek Church. If that's you and you would like to start giving, it's as easy as texting GIVE to 96995, visit us on our website at the Give page, or, as always, mail anything in to our physical address.
Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Spring Creek Church, we're so excited that you have tuned in with us. And if you are coming next week, we're so excited. We have missed you guys. So we look forward to seeing you in church or online. Let's just lift up God this morning with everything that we have.
I searched the world, it couldn't fill me. Man's empty praise and treasures that fade, never enough. You came along and put me back together, and every desire is now satisfied. Here in love. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing. Nothing is better than you. Flaws, Lord, you've seen them all, and you still call me friend. 'Cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley, and there's not a place your mercy and grace won't find me again. There's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing. Nothing is better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Nothing is better than you. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing. Nothing is better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing. Nothing is better than you. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who
Hebrews 4:15-16 says, "For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weakness, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace and help in a time of need." God isn't out of touch with our lives as much as it may feel like it, but we can come boldly to the throne and receive only what He can give, and He wants us to do that as a response instead of shying away from Him. So let's look to Him, let's receive what He can give us, which is grace today.
How deep the Father's love for us, how vast beyond all measure, that He should give His only Son to make a wretch His treasure. How great the pain of searing loss, the Father turns His face away, as wounds which mar the chosen one bring many sons to glory. Behold the man upon the cross, my sin upon His shoulders. Ashamed, I hear my mocking voice call out among the scoffers. It was my sin that held Him there until it was accomplished. His dying breath has brought me life. I know that it is finished. It is finished. Oh, it is finished. Oh, I will not boast in anything. No gifts, no power, no wisdom. But I will boast in Jesus Christ, His death and resurrection. What should I gain from His reward? I cannot give an answer, but this I know with all my heart. His wounds have paid my ransom. Why should I gain from His reward? I cannot give an answer, but this I know with all my heart. His wounds have paid my ransom, but this I know with all my heart. His wounds have paid my ransom.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining with us today. My name is Patrick. I'm one of the pastors on staff here at Springcreek, or as many people just know me as, Not Keith. I'm so glad that you guys are watching with us today. I want to address one thing real quick, and that's that the church is going to be opening and having worship in person quite soon. So if that's something that you're interested in, we want to let you know that there's going to be some adjustments and some changes. We're going to require everybody to wear masks, as well as enforce some social distancing. When I know that as soon as I see so many of you guys, I'm going to want to give you a huge hug because I haven't seen you in a month, but we're going to refrain and limit any sort of physical contact that we have while we're here. And to anybody who just is not feeling comfortable getting out and getting in person or in public yet, we want to let you know that this online service is not going to change. We are still going to be here, and the same level of excellence that we have here today is going to continue even when we're worshiping in person. In fact, we even hope to expand and make it better. But today, I'm with you guys, and I have a message entitled, "The Story Isn't About You." And it's one part that I just want to look at a very basic, very well-known passage in Scripture that I know that many of you guys are very familiar with. It's something that you might have heard several times, and even if you're hearing this for the very first time, I just want to let you know you are in the right place. Because as we read it, we often have missed what makes this one of the most beautiful passages in the entire Bible. And it's that beauty, that part of it, that moves it from something that just changes our behavior into something that changes our heart. So if you have your Bibles, you can open up. We're going to have it on the screen. We're reading from the book of Luke. It's a story about a man named Jesus who came to this earth who claimed that he was the Son of God. And during all these interactions, he had these moments where he had these discussions with people. And the story we're about to read in this book of Luke is a discussion he has with a lawyer. Let's go ahead and read it. It says this: "One day, an expert in the religious law stood up to test Jesus by asking him this question: 'Teacher, what should I do to inherit eternal life?' Jesus replied, 'What does the law of Moses say, and how have you read it?' The man answered, 'You must love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all your soul, and all your strength, and all your mind, and to love your neighbor as yourself.' 'Right,' Jesus told them, 'do this and you will live.' But the man wanted to justify his actions, so he asked Jesus, 'And who is my neighbor?' Jesus replied with a story. A Jewish man was traveling from Jerusalem down to Jericho, and he was attacked by bandits. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him up, and left him half dead beside the road. By chance, a priest came along. But when he saw the man lying there, he crossed to the other side of the road and passed him by. A temple assistant walked over and looked at him lying there, and he also passed on by to the other side. Then a despised Samaritan came along, and when he saw the man, he felt compassion for him. Going over to him, the Samaritan soothed his wounds with olive oil and wine and bandaged them. And they put the man on his own donkey and took him to an inn, where he took care of him. The next day, he handed the innkeeper 2 silver coins, telling him, 'Take care of this man. If the bill runs any higher for this, I will pay you the next time I am here.' Now, which of these 3 would you say was neighbor to the man who attacked by bandits?" Jesus asked. And the man replied, "The one who showed him mercy." Then Jesus said, "Yes, now go and do the same." Hey, would you guys take a quick moment and just all across where we are, whether we're watching in Garland or in Texas or even across the world, would you guys just pray with me real quick? God, I'm thankful for this community that we have. I'm thankful that Spring Creek is just a unique place where we get to exist and learn more about you. That learning about you goes beyond just a knowledge, but it goes down to our hearts and begins changing who we are. That we would begin to look like you, we would begin to act like you, we would talk like you. So Father, I pray that in all these things we would start to reflect you. That the God of the entire universe, the God of heaven and earth, the one who loves all of us, that we begin to do and see and act that same love that you have for us. I pray for these things in your son's name. Amen. Does anybody here love doing the same thing over and over again? I know that there's people watching that you love repetition, you love routine, and I am not one of them. Which is why I constantly try to seek new experiences. And one of the things I've learned about bringing a child into this world, I think they call it parenting, is that kids love doing the same thing. They love the repetition of doing the same thing over and over and over again. And to every parent out there that has watched Moana and Toy Story for 6,000 times in the last month, I see your pain. And it's real. But one of the things that I know is I take comfort in taking care of my son. I have a 2-year-old named Wilder. I take comfort in joining him in these repetitive acts because I understand that his experience is completely different than mine. As a 2-year-old, everything is new to him. Every single day, he has to adapt to new experiences, new locations, and new things that he's never had to deal with before. Everything is new, and he's constantly learning those adaptations day by day. And I'm beginning to understand that the repetition that he does is, in fact, very comforting. One of our many things that we do as father and son is I take him to an arcade. And there's one right by our house, and of all the things that he loves doing, we show up to this arcade, and there's lights, there's sounds, there's video games, pinball machines, noises, everything you can imagine in an arcade, but his favorite thing to do is to take the coins and put them in the slot over and over and over again. Half the time he doesn't even play the game. He just loves taking the coins, putting them in over and over and over. And that simple, repetitive act is something that brings comfort to him. And the last time that we went there, something interesting happened. We ended the session by playing a game that many of you guys would have seen at a carnival. It's this game where you have these, usually they're milk jugs or they have clowns painted on them, and you take balls and you simply knock them down for points. And there my son just sat in front of this game and just put coins in over and over and over. And occasionally he'd take a ball, throw it at the clown, but he loved putting coins in over and over. And we went home, and I expected the same thing that would happen every single night. We would get him ready for bed. We would talk to him, and his language skills, as much pleasure as he's able to show us, is not very much. But as we came home, his mom simply said to him, he said, how was your day, Wilder? What did you get to do? And he looked up at her with this quizzical look on his face, and he almost as if he was choosing his words, and he said, throw ball, clown, fall down. Throw ball, clown, fall down. Which to you means very little. But for him, I want you to understand that for the very first time a human being on this planet told his story. He usually just doesn't have an answer and just rolls around and goes to sleep. But that day, he had a story to tell, and he had the words to be able to choose that story and go and tell us and communicate what his experience was. And you know what's interesting? Is that if you watch people, you can learn a lot by the stories they tell. One thing you can instantly recognize is what stage of life somebody is simply by the stories they tell. If you find yourself at a party and the person talking to you is going on and on about a stuffed animal, you're talking to a 6-year-old. If you're talking to somebody and they have this massive story to tell about their grandkids, you're talking to somebody who's retired. If you're at home, maybe you're watching the service online and you hear somebody that's talking on and on about their child, you're talking to a new parent. The stories we tell are important because they're what we see about ourselves. But you see, most stories people tell are unrelatable, they're boring, they might be off subject unless you have a personal experience to the story they're trying to tell you. You know, a stranger talking about their pet chameleon is far less interesting than your spouse telling you the story of how they fell in love with you. Or a billionaire talking about his margin calls is far less interesting than your parent telling you the story of being able to hold you in their arms for the very first time. The far more important and universal stories that matter most to us is important because of this simple fact. The stories you connect with are about you. Your favorite movies connect with you because they say something about your greatest dreams or your deepest fears. The books that you love say something about the wisdom you hope to accomplish in life. And the stories you tell your friends and your family, they're the ones that when you command the attention of those around you, it's because you have something important about yourself. And you see the stories about compassion and mercy from a stranger that Jesus told a lawyer in ancient Israel connect with so many of us. The story of this Good Samaritan, because we think the story is about us. But this story isn't about you, or at least not in the way that you think. This man asked Jesus to justify his own actions. Like him, we all struggle with this inherent need, and please don't elbow your spouse who you hopefully are sitting next to, or single people, don't keep this in the back of your mind as ammunition for an argument. But we all have this need to feel right. This definitive self-righteousness often can be hindered to growing as us as people. The embracing of a true change requires this humility that is often so hard to find in ourselves. And I sincerely hope that us as a community, us as Spring Creek, choose that at least this morning, as we listen to this message, that we would choose to have a humble heart to hear. One I hope that this lawyer, who Jesus told his story to, embraced after their discussion. And without speculating too much, we can see that this man clearly wanted one thing from Jesus. He wanted boundaries around his neighborhood. You see, the lawyer does something we constantly do over and over. He wanted to know where his neighborhood ended, like coins in a slot, over and over. We want to know who our neighbor is and who our neighbor isn't. He wants to know if he can be a neighbor only to a select elite few. But you see, Jesus turns the entire world on this man's head with this story. And he ends up changing the definition of neighbor. Jesus changed this man's question, and I want you guys to watch this, from who is my neighbor towards who am I a neighbor to? It's no longer a story about your behavior on who you choose to act good or wrongly with. It's now one about identity, on who you are as a person. So let's take a look at Jesus' story, and hopefully we can see the beauty that so many of us have missed in the story of the Good Samaritan, the one we think is about us. You see, the first thing to acknowledge about this is that this story is a parable. It's a common teaching tool that Jesus used to take an important truth, something that he really has to say, and he relates it to us as a story. Just like a movie, a lot of us love seeing because it says something about us. Like throwing balls at a clown, he hopes that this story, this Good Samaritan, is something we identify as our own. Normally, a parable has some clues. Normally, it has very generic terms like a certain man or a master and its servants. He doesn't use names or proper nouns, yet in this one, Jesus uses the name of two real cities, the name of Jerusalem and the name of Jericho. So why did he do that? It's because he's referring to a road that everyone listening in on this conversation would have been familiar with. It's because this road is not a story. This road actually exists. So what is a real road doing in a made-up story? See, according to Jewish law, worshiping God is not something that we would recognize as today, because you can worship God right now, in your living room, on your phone, in your bed, in your pajamas, all alone, on your iPhone, your laptop, your TV, on YouTube, on Facebook. It does not matter. If you're driving in your car, you can worship God in any place and any time. But yet in this Jewish day, things were different. worshiping God required you to take this journey to a place in Jerusalem called the temple. And usually that journey would require you to sacrifice an animal to atone from all the sins and the wrong things that you had done. So everyone listening to Jesus in that day would have instantly been familiar with the concept of traveling a long journey to the city of Jerusalem. And the road that we know he's speaking of is actually about 17 miles long. And it's an incredibly rocky road that descends from Jerusalem almost 3,000 feet down to the city of Jericho. And it would have been on the dangerous end of the spectrum of roads to travel by. So why did Jesus include a made-up road, or a real road, in a made-up story? And it's because he wanted everyone listening to know he wasn't just talking to the lawyer. He was talking to them. He drew attention by connecting the story to them personally. If I were to tell you a story that you had to take a perilous journey, and I used terms like a winding path or a perilous situation, it would be far less real to you than if I said you had to spend the night in the south side of Chicago, or if you had to walk the roads of Pleasant Grove or Hell's Kitchen in New York. You see, what makes this story real is this road, which also makes the second point more interesting. See, the road was often traveled by religious pilgrims that we talked about that often had to carry livestock or money, which meant that it was a prime spot for thieves and bandits to come and to steal, hurt, and destroy anybody coming down that road. And they would often wait for the most vulnerable people like women and children, or people that were traveling by themselves. And then they would take all their money and they would often either kill them or leave them there to die. But you see, those thieves and those bandits created an economic opportunity for entrepreneurs to set up these inns all along the way. And these inns provided safety from the elements as well as protection from these robbers. And these tiny inns would be commonplace, that as you traveled from Jerusalem to Jericho or from Jericho to Jerusalem, you would pass by several of these inns along the roadside. So when this Samaritan brought a wounded, hurting man to safety, he was bringing him to an inn. What I love about this story is that Jesus paints for us a picture of his church. That our neighborhood that surrounds us can be quite dangerous at times. It can be quite damaging. Yet as we walk down this path, there are these tiny communities along the way that provide healing and refuge from the storms of life. And you see, the building that Samaritan brought that man to would have actually done very little. It might have provided him safety from the weather, but that's about it. You know, it seems that the people inside that inn were the most important part. It was the innkeeper who tended to that man's wounds and nursed him back to health. And if you really want to know what Spring Creek is about, look no further than this tiny inn on the road from Jerusalem to Jericho and its innkeeper. Because it's Jesus who inspires us to hold tight to those who are in need, those whose wounds need dressing. One thing I know that we like to say around here is that serving others is a privilege. It's not a burden. Because we don't know your full story yet. We know that some of you guys that tuned in tonight, your life is falling apart. Some of you guys that are going to show up on the 18th, you're coming in with some pretty serious issues. We don't know your full story, but I want you to know this. To any mom who's watching who feels like your life is falling apart because your kids are doing school online and you can't keep it together. To the dad who just found out that you've lost your job and you don't know how to tell your family, you don't know where providing is coming from. Or to the business owner who you have to make the decision on who to lay off and who to keep on. I want you to know that you're not alone. And especially to the teens who feel like this year has been robbed from them. Do you feel like nobody notices you? I want you to know that this inn is for you. Spring Creek is your inn. This is a place and it's a community where healing can happen. And you know what? Nothing is special about this building. This building didn't spread the gospel, but this church did. This building didn't provide people community, but this church did. This building didn't provide healing, but this church did. This building was not a safe refuge during this pandemic, but the people of this church have been. You know, my favorite part is this building doesn't worship a living, true, breathing God. But you're the church, and you did. The building's been closed for months, but the church never stopped being the church. And I want you to know in the next coming weeks, I'm really excited to see all your faces in person. I really can't wait. I'm an extrovert, and so of all the things that I want to do, I want to be around my people. I want to be around people like you. But never once have I thought that this church stopped just because the building doors were closed. But I'd also be remiss in telling the story of the Good Samaritan to not talk about the elephant in the room. The story is known worldwide as the Good Samaritan. And in order to understand how shocking it would have been to hear this, you need to know a little something about ancient Israel and the beliefs that defined the people listening to this at the time. You see, based on their understanding of the Old Testament, the audience that were there, the Jews were obsessed with this moral foundation of purity. They believed that their outward actions reflected their inward heart. They believed that if they showed these actions of purity, like the dietary, the religious, and the social purity that they subscribed to, they hoped that would show an inward pure heart. They hoped that this belief would be one that connected them with God. Unfortunately, the religious leaders of this day took this idea to an extreme. And you know what they did? They started taking this into ideas of racial purity. And all of a sudden, God's love was only for people of a certain race. So if a Jew married somebody who is not a Jew, called a Gentile, and had children, those children would be known as Samaritans, basically half-breeds. And they represented an irreputable impurity that couldn't be undone to the religious leaders of that day. The Samaritans were rejected outsiders. They were cursed people. They weren't Jews and they weren't not Jews. And the Jewish people at the time would have nothing to do with the Samaritan. An imperfect analogy of this, of how hated this community was, would to be like for if you were sitting at home today and you heard me tell the story of the good white supremacist. Now you'd be rightfully thinking, how awful, nothing good could ever come from a white supremacist. And that's exactly the reaction Jesus would have gotten. The difference in the analogy is obviously that we can choose to judge people on the fruit that they produce, like racism, versus on their actual race, like Samaritans. But the shock value of hearing something like that would have lasted. And as people, we build assumptions of others before we even meet them. And many of them often are negative. I myself have been guilty of this. And if I could just take a moment of vulnerability, I would like to say that in my younger days, I was quite guilty. You see, as an 8th grader, there was nothing more irreprehensible or disgusting to me than a 7th grader. I know, simpler days. And if most middle schools, it's true. And to all my middle school teachers watching this, you secretly know how vicious the middle school years can be. But what Jesus is doing here is he's taking a social taboo. That to these people, to the 8th graders out there, hearing the story of a good 7th grader woke them up to their own issues of self-superiority. And Jesus picked these cursed people, these disgusting members of society to others, to drive home this point, that we no longer get to pick our neighbors. The second we can define who is and who isn't a neighbor, we can begin to refuse mercy. We can refuse compassion, and we can refuse love. And it all starts with this very definition. Who is my neighbor? And the lawyer heard this story, and I can imagine his disgust with a Samaritan. I mean, at the very end of the story, he doesn't even utter the words. He simply says, the man who showed mercy. And that man had to be challenged by Jesus more than all, because nobody that chooses their neighbors is justified. And in order for us to connect with this story, we would have to choose who we would connect with. And this lawyer, like many of us, had chosen to see himself as the Samaritan, the one who is supposed to show good. And you know, that's exactly where a lot of us get this story wrong. I told you, this story is not about you, at least not in the way that you think. And in order to connect best, we see ourselves as the good guys. We see ourselves as the Samaritan. We often want to be the sinner or the one who can do the most good. We want to be the one who helps, or the one who's in a position to help others. But if we're really honest with ourselves and take a moment of courage to do some self-inventory, we can really find out that that's not you and that's not me. You see, there's somebody else in this story who gets overlooked almost entirely. And his story can be summed up by the simple words, it's okay to not be okay. And I don't know who I'm talking to today, somebody who needs to hear that, somebody who feels like they have to have it together and hasn't been real honest with themselves. Somebody that was similar to me. I remember when I was looking for a job, I was watching Springcreek's intro video before I applied. And Pastor Keith explained something quite interesting. Normally you would watch a video to understand what the church is about and why you would want to work there. And Pastor Keith opened up with the lines, let me explain why you would not want to work here at Springcreek. And he then went in to discuss how his marriage almost fell apart because of his own inadequacies and issues with codependency. And then he began to embrace this idea that he was wrong in leading the church for several years, and he had to correct that. And I realized that this is a place that's a lot more about healing than about being right. And I was dealing with my own struggles at the time of feeling betrayed by my former church and bitter towards those who I felt had left me high and dry. But I quickly realized that this community, Spring Creek, identifies with Jesus' magnificent mercy and healing that comes with being able to face our own brokenness and our own sin. Would you be just courageous enough to look at yourself this morning and see that I've spent a large part of my life avoiding personal problems and pain? In fact, if you want to go a step further, I'm an expert on that. If you want to do a seminar on how to avoid things in your life that hurt, I will sell out like a heartbeat because I am so good at doing that. And I've had a hard time to come to realization that it's okay to feel broken and busted and to be able to stare your own failure right in the face. And maybe you're the one who feels like you've been beat up by your neighborhood. Maybe you're the one that feels like you've been wronged by others' actions. Maybe you feel like you've been robbed of what was rightfully yours and you've been crushed by the unmet expectations of others. Maybe I just want to be honest, maybe you've been hurt by the church. Maybe it's been the religious leaders, maybe it's been your pastor or your priest who's been the one who's caused the deepest wounds. Maybe you expected them to cross the street to help you only for them to walk on by and look after their own interests, leaving you behind. So I want to come to the part of the story that is about you. It's about me. The part of the story that nobody wants to identify with. In this story, you and I are the one who is left by the road to die. Which means that this story really isn't about you. It's actually about Jesus. We often forget that we're not the best at showing up with kindness or compassion. Mercy is not high on our list of traits that is celebrated. And I hope we don't need a reminder to you to see that our current climate prides itself on creating deeper divides in new neighborhoods that we're not a part of. But that's not what Jesus showed us. What I love is that heaven did not stay behind in its gated community. The creator of the entire universe blew out the walls of the neighborhood and he came down here. He came as a cursed man. He was mocked by those that he loved. He was rejected by those that he came to help. And the neighborhood that he came to is you and me. The religious teachers of the system of this world have passed us by and are unwilling or unable to help us where we need it the most. What this lawyer realized is that he isn't the Good Samaritan. Because you see, the Good Samaritan was standing in front of him the whole time. Jesus is the one who has constantly been rejected over and over and over. And we've isolated him outside of our own neighborhood. But God didn't stand for that. He moved right in to know what it was like to be just like one of us. He found us, he found you in your own hurt and your own pain, and he was able to pick you up, put you on his horse, and take you to the closest inn, where he knew that you would be a part of a process of healing, and he would be the one to pay the ultimate price for your healing. And he brought us together in this beautiful community, this inn on the side of a road called Springcreek. And what I hope you to know is that good neighbors are made by good Samaritans. And there's no Samaritan more good than Jesus. And this story isn't about you. It's not about a lawyer. It's about him. It's about the name of Jesus and the mercy that he can show us. And we often see that God's work in our lives, when we see, is through our neighbors. The priest Henry Nouwen said this. He said, the neighbor, Jesus makes clear, is not the poor man lying on the side of the street, stripped, beaten, and half dead, but the Samaritan who crossed the road, bandaged his wounds, poured oil and wine on them, lifted him onto his own mount, and took him to the inn and looked after him. My neighbor is the one who crossed the street for me. Can we just stop for a moment and realize we are not the ones who can fix this world? We are the ones who God fixes this world through. And it is him who's the one that when we have our eyes on him, we realize that we don't have to be good enough to earn God's favor. We don't have to be perfect. You cannot make yourself pure enough to be in God's good grace. That when we see this story, we often see that our brokenness left us in a place where we were going to die without his help. And you need to know that Jesus crossed that road when nobody else would for you. You have somebody that loves you and accepts you without question. And you have somebody who is able to heal you today, and he is the one who lifts our eyes up so that we're not just staring at ourselves all day long, so that we can lift our eyes up and see those around us. See the one that he has always called his neighbors. See the ones who are racked with depression, anxiety, injustice, and poverty, and to be the ones that we can see as no longer outside of our neighborhood, but somebody who is next to us and lives and breathes the same. I'm reminded of a time where my wife and I were without a home. We were dealing with a dishonest landlord who basically had left us in a very precarious circumstance in which we didn't have a place that we could safely call our own. And faced with being homeless, there was a family in Springcreek that was able to allow us to live with them for a couple weeks while we figured something out. When we didn't really have very much to give back to them. We still don't. And you know, as much credit as they are due, and we are incredibly grateful for that family, I know that it was our Heavenly Father who knew to show us mercy, who used other people to cross the road and to be a neighbor to us. So we do no longer get the opportunity to pick and choose who our neighbors are. Everyone that we come across is in our neighborhood. And we choose to enact those things because of the story that God has connected us to about him, because he is the Good Samaritan to us. Would you guys pray with me? God, I thank you so much for all my friends and family here. Thank you that in a couple weeks I get to see many of them face to face, and I thank you for the ones that are staying home and continuing to be a part of this community digitally. God, I pray that you would continue to knit our hearts together, that it would be your wine, your oil, and that is able to bandage our wounds. That we would be able to see that you were always a neighbor to us, that you never rejected us or left us outside. So who are we to do any different with our own? Regardless of political affiliation, regardless of racial tensions, Lord, we choose to see everybody else around us as our neighbor in need of us crossing the street. Lord, I thank you for those with us today. In your son's name, amen. Like I said before, I'm excited to see you guys in person soon, but please stay with us. We have a discussion after the sermon where we're able to dive in depth and talk through some of the things that we're not able to cover here in the sermon. I hope to see you guys soon.
Yadi, Laura, thank you so much for joining me for the discussion. Fun take on the Good Samaritan story from Pastor Patrick. I love hearing his insights, especially thinking through the story that we all participate in as we put ourselves in the shoes of the Good Samaritan or the priest or the robbers or whoever. We relate. And that's the good thing about parables, is that Jesus tells them in a way that we relate. And he told this one in a very real way. The story involves a lot of life change because I think Jesus is demonstrating the way that people's lives have been changed through events like this. And the Good Samaritan's life was changed in a way that he was served by someone who shouldn't have served him. Where have you guys seen in your life or in this church, where have you seen people serve in a way that changes someone's life?
I mean, honestly, as far as where have we seen people serve where it changes a life, it would be everywhere. I mean, from setting up the free coffee to watching a baby and make a new parent feel safe so that they can go and have that hour of time to worship and be with other adults. I know Diana Ramirez, our student leader, has an amazing story about one of the welcome team who, when she first started coming here, she came every Saturday night. And then she missed a few. And when she came back, the welcome team person at the door was like, "Where have you been? I've missed you." That changed her. That made her feel like this was her home. That was a small thing for that woman to do, but it made a huge difference to Diana. And I think every time you reach outside of yourself and do something, whether it's big or small, it has the capacity to change someone else's life.
Yes.
Yeah,
true.
that's really good. Being part of Springcreek Church staff here as a pastor, honestly, it's so great to talk to people and hearing their stories on how they started coming to church, how they got saved, how they accepted Jesus, how their lives were transformed. And it was always because of someone else's service, someone else's dedication, someone else leaving their own needs to the side to go ahead and help that other person in need. And that is what keeps the kindness and humanity and just Jesus really being shown through those, being able to help those that are truly in need, to really step out of your comfort zone and stepping into faith to be able to help people. And that's a great thing to hear.
What we're able to do at Spring Creek, we could never do as a staff.
Yeah.
I mean, we would never be able to reach the people we do without those people, those volunteers that give their time, their energy, the people who give monetarily. Everyone here is so giving. I think that's what makes our mission so compelling, that you can be a part of it.
I love that.
Yeah, I think connecting is our purpose is something that we say here, and serving is our passion.
Yeah.
And we can do more when we do more together. So it's like you could bring a can of beans, and that's going to feed someone. But if we're all bringing different elements, we can all offer something that'll change someone's life. I do love hearing stories of people who came to Spring Creek Church because, well, I went to Good Sam's, I was in a hard point, I got some food, and I remember seeing Spring Creek's name on a bag or their name on the truck or hearing their name, and it just brought them here. And through a small act of service, their life was changed when they encountered Jesus because of our efforts, feeble as they may be sometimes. In this story, we have different characters. We have a man who was beat up. We have robbers who beat him up. We have men who walked past him. We have a man who stopped. We have an innkeeper. As you hear this story, as you've heard it time and time again, who do you relate to most in the Good Samaritan story?
I love the way he broke it down because honestly, I think at different points in our lives and our maturity, both, mentally and spiritually, we've probably been all of those people. I know I have. I know I've walked by a need, and maybe I felt guilty about it later, or maybe I never noticed it because I was so tuned into myself. I feel like the innkeeper sometimes because I have a lot of people who are like, "Hey, we should do this," and then I jump on board, and I feel like sometimes I'm the helper, which I'm okay. I'm okay being that. But too many times I've been the person that walks by. I'm thankful for the times that I've been in a place to be outside of myself and be that Samaritan. I love that story because it is so pivotal in how you see people and how you feel about others. And I think what's great about it and asking who you identify with, you could be two people at one time. You could be that person needing to be helped and still have something to give someone else at the same time. That's one of the things that I find really beautiful about that story.
I agree exactly with what Laura said, that in different parts of my life, I was one of those scenarios there. You know, I didn't grow up in a Christian home, so I was the type of person that I didn't care. I would walk by you. You're a waste of my time. I didn't know you. You know, the thing that we were taught was defend for your own. But along the way, with Jesus' help and knowledge and caring and kindness, everything that you learn from Christ, then you become to the point that you're the innkeeper, or you're the person that does provide, that helps out. But yeah, I think for a big chunk of my life, I was the one that always got jumped and beaten and always just needing someone's help. But I'm just so thankful now because of people that do give of their time, that were there for us and everything else, that it really transformed my life. And I saw Jesus in the flesh.
I think that's a powerful point that both of you guys have made, is that we all relate to a different character at different times. I always see myself as the priest that walked by, like, I'm going to cross the road to go past you, not because I don't care. I'm just kind of busy. I'm in a hurry. I'm on to do good things. And we can blame all those good things on our unwillingness to act. And I think we all do have moments where, well, I'm the robber. My words have beaten someone down. My negligence have caused pain for someone. But when we can figure out that we all play a different role in the story, and that's not necessarily what matters most, it's the role that Jesus plays in the story of stepping in for us. While Jesus has been the Jew that was beaten, that was knocked down, Jesus is the one who crossed the other side of the street to rescue us in our own puddle of sin and mess and helplessness, and he provides healing and he provides hope. And the challenge here is to see, like, who are my neighbors that I'm looking at? Who am I encountering on a daily basis? And I think it's easier for us to see, well, the Samaritan should not engage with that person. I know, like, there's those people over there that I don't really talk to, so I'm not going to go help them. I'm going to stick over here. Who are those neighbors that you more easily help, and who are the neighbors that you look past more easily?
I think it's super easy to help our friends, those that we connect with, that we're already in a small group with, that we've been doing life with. And so not only do you see the opportunities to help, but they're right there. And I think that we tend to think globally sometimes. When you see a big call to action, when there's been a storm, when there's been damage, when there's famine, I think where I fall short, I can't speak for you guys sometimes, is just those people that are in my community, but kind of on the fringes, that I need to take a little more time with, that I need to be a little more noticing of them. And I think as we expand that, your kids have friends and their parents. And I mean, there's 1,000 ways to expand your community. And when you start thinking of it like that, like, where can I start something where a ripple reaches? I think you look at people differently. And I know I need to be better at that sometimes. It's easy to get caught up in just your little group.
Yes,
because it's comfortable.
Yeah, no, that is so true. Like, I find myself being just more calmer and just being more helpful to those that are closer to me, but not intentional. Right. It's just because they're there all the time and they're very honest and they kind of share needs, or how you kind of get to know them so well that you already know what they need, right?
Right.
But then I realize too that I tend to neglect those that kind of God does bring into my life, but they're strangers. They're so distant, or they have some sort of like some sin that hurt me at one point in my life, right? There's certain things that I'm very helpful for those that I came out of. So anyone that came out of like some sort of drug addiction or some sort of any addiction, or people that came out of, whatever hurt I came out of, I tend to kind of come closer to those. But I got to realize that just like the type of light where wherever we're at, God is needing for us to be ready, and for those needs, for those strangers that do come along the way, that they still need to know Jesus and they still are trying to reach out one way or another.
Yeah, I think our neighbors are the ones we can relate to or be comfortable with. and our closest neighbors are the ones that we're most comfortable relating to.
Yeah.
But for me, I think I'm so bent toward comfort that I can kind of justify not identifying other neighbors. And I always think, man, if I were to walk past that Good Samaritan, or past the Jew who was hurt, who was beat up, if I were to walk past him, it'd probably be because he didn't ask for help. He wasn't laying there saying, "Can you help, please?" over there across the street. Probably because he was really hurt and couldn't. But that's where I get frustrated. Like, if you need help, just ask for help. And that's not what Jesus did for us. He knew that we needed help. Yeah. He saw the need and he met the need. And that's how we're to respond. We shouldn't have to wait for someone who's hungry to say, "Can you give me some food?" We shouldn't have to wait for someone who's hopeless to say, "Can you give me some hope? Can you point me in the right direction?" We can identify those needs of people who maybe have lost a job, or single moms who are trying to work while also coordinate childcare and virtual learning and all these difficult tasks. We should be able to see those needs. Jesus saw the needs for us. He sees our sin and he steps in to redeem it. He sees our pain and he steps in to comfort it. And that's our calling. And that's the hope that comes from the Good Samaritan story, is that Jesus did cross the street. Jesus did nurse our wounds, and he did set us free, and he paid the cost and then some to cover us.
And he used the Samaritan, which is where we come in, to be open to those opportunities to serve and help.
Yes, we get to be a part of that life change in a really cool way. Yeah. Well, Laura Yachty, thank you so much for joining us for the conversation this week. And I'm excited as we got to hear from Pastor Patrick and the Good Samaritan, and we're moving forward into a series called The Struggle is Real. I think we're going to have some real conversations about how we might struggle or overcome some struggles in different relationships we have. Y'all have a great week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.